In this video, I'm going to go over one of the best weapons in Battlefield 1, the RSC 1917. There are two variants of this gun, the factory and the optical, but personally I am a massive fan of the optical version. It was a weapon that I enjoyed before the North Sea Turning Tides update, but in all honesty I much preferred to use the Autoloading 8.35. Now though, it's a beast. As you've probably already heard, it has a 2-shot kill range of up to 70 meters, and even with only 6 rounds, getting 3 kills before having to reload is quite a common occurrence. Yes, you have to hit your shots, but that goes for a lot of weapons in Battlefield 1. Let's go over the details of this weapon comparing the factory and the optical variant first, then touch on a few tips that will help you improve your game, and then finally compare it to the 8.35, the weapon that I feel that the RSC is attempting to replace since the patch. So let's start off with a quick comparison between the factory and the optical variant of the RSC. The optical has less spread when aiming down sights, and the factory has a faster recoil decrease and faster spread decrease when hip firing. In my opinion, it comes down to what you're using it for. Are you the type of player that loves to be mega aggressive? Then if you are certain you want to take the RSC, then you can take the factory. If you want more range, then of course take the optical. So a couple of tips and tricks when using the RSC. Let's assume you've taken the optical, because the factory isn't really the best weapon in class for me. I think if you're being aggressive, there are better choices out there. Unless of course you have aimbot-like aim, then of course go take the RSC factory and do some work. If you're at that stage though, you probably don't need the tips and tricks I'm about to offer. If you're using the optical and you play in a similar way to me, I was quite an aggressive medic player and I was looking to get more kills because I kept on getting caught out, especially since the patch, as you die a lot faster. Here are some tips that you'll probably find useful. Firstly, make sure you play from behind cover. This seems like a really obvious one and I've mentioned it loads of times before. Most players on Battlefield will mention this. If you're playing from behind cover, what that basically means is you have a wall or you have a box or you have some sort of object that you're hiding behind. You peek, spot your target, take a couple of shots, and then if fire comes back your way, you can dive back behind the cover. What you'll often find people doing on Battlefield is running out into the open, spotting an enemy, and opening fire. It's all well and good if you kill them, because then you just run to some more cover and continue on your way, but if you don't kill them and they start shooting back, you don't have any cover, and there's a high chance that someone else shoots you too, and that's pretty much game over. So you need to make sure you're using the cover as best you can. Secondly, make sure you take your time when using the RSC. You only get 6 rounds, and although I have said you can take up to 3 players down with 6 rounds, spamming it is not really going to work. You want to make sure you hit your shots, so you only require 2 to kill an enemy. So make sure you hit your first shot, hit your second follow-up shot as quickly as possible, but make sure that you're aiming properly first. It's far faster to take your time with 2 shots than fire 6, because you spammed and you've missed a few rounds. This is the same for most weapons, but it's really important with the 8.35 and the RSC especially. Take your time with those shots. Another trick with the RSC, and this is something that you can apply to other weapons, but I think it really does work with the RSC best. Make sure you place yourself in engagement ranges where you are going to have the advantage. And what I mean by this is don't run into a house where you know there are 2 assault players. Unless you hit them both straight away, you're probably going to die. They might have Hellregals, MP18s, Automaticos, you name it, they're going to be better equipped for that situation. Instead, look for a different route where you can take the advantage and you can do the damage. I'm talking about mid to long range engagements. Say you're playing on Amiens and you're on those central C and D flags, the ones that run across the railway with the 2 bridges. Now what a smart move would be is take a room on either side and look to shoot across to the other side of the tracks. Maybe shoot down the tracks towards the bridge. What would not be a smart move is running into one of the buildings where you know there's loads of enemies, sliding around the corner and trying to take them all out. Maybe it'll work, but that's not what the RSC excels at. If that's what you're looking to do, take a different gun altogether. Also consider the map you're playing on. If you're playing, as I just mentioned, on Amiens, the RSC is probably okay, but maybe there are better weapons to take. If you're playing on Fort de Vaux, I would suggest to take something else entirely. If you're playing on Monte Grappa or you're playing on Foul Fortress, one of these longer range maps, the RSC is probably a really good gun to take, especially on some of the operations campaigns where you are pinned down a little bit and it's almost like having a sniper with that 2-shot kill, and it does excel at those medium to long range engagements. Now let's move on to the comparison between the 8.35 Marksman and the RSC Optical. A weapon that was heralded as the best option in the medic class for quite some time was the Autoloading 8.35. Starting with the most obvious difference, the 8.35 has a far faster fire rate of 359 RPM compared to 179 RPM with the RSC. This gives the 8.35 a time to kill of 337 milliseconds at very close range. What that means is it will take you 337 milliseconds to kill an enemy from the minute you start clicking your mouse to the minute that they are dead. It's quite hard to put into perspective because obviously when you're playing you don't count these things, it's a very small period of time. Basically that's pretty quick. The RSC has a time to kill of 338 milliseconds at very close range. Very close stuff between the two contenders. At 30 meters, the time to kill has risen to 380 milliseconds for the 8.35 and 377 milliseconds with the RSC. What that's telling me is at the very close range, the 8.35 is slightly better. At medium range, the RSC starts to become better. But again, the time to kill is very close between the two guns, almost negligible at this point. The 8.35 has a time to kill of 440 milliseconds at 70 meters. Whilst the RSC has a time to kill of 432 milliseconds at 70 meters. Very, very close again, and 70 meters marks the point as well where the bullet damage starts to change with the RSC. Again, that's why I've included it. Now I know these stats are all very close, and therefore I could have just said that the weapons are similar, but sometimes you need to illustrate that point with some facts. It's not always the best way just to play and say, oh, it feels faster than this gun, and this gun feels better than that gun. If you've got some facts, it means that you can really understand why the gun feels like it does. When it comes to damage, the RSC will two-shot up to 70 meters. So all of those stats I just gave regarding TTK with the RSC occurred with just 2 rounds. The 8.35 requires 3 rounds to do the same up to 70 meters. However, due to the increased fire rate, it can just about keep up. This shows that if you hit your body shots, the RSC is a better weapon. After 70 meters, the 8.35 is a 4-bullet kill. This is not really very useful considering you only get 5 rounds, so unless you hit headshots, you aren't really in a position for those really long range engagements. The RSC never drops below a 3-shot kill at any range, and although the scope isn't designed for super long range fights, it's good to know the gun has the power to 3-shot at any range, with the potential to kill 2 enemies with the 6-round magazine. Now this is a lot of information to take in, and of course if you haven't used either weapon, this isn't really going to be too important to you. You need to get out there and try both the guns, but what you will notice is the 8.35 is accurate and you can spam it, however it doesn't do as much damage as the RSC. Whilst the RSC is more slow and methodical, yet will kill faster if you get everything lined up perfectly. The RSC has a reload of 3.3 seconds when empty or 2.7 seconds when bullets are left compared to a 1.6 second reload with the 8.35. You can also reload individual rounds with the 8.35, but as we know, you'll be spending most of your time reloading anyway. Basically, this shows again that the 8.35 is a faster weapon, both in terms of reloading and in terms of spamming bullets down range if that's what you're after. How about ease of use? Now this is quite an important one. Ease of use with weapons is something people need to look into more, I feel, when making these videos. Just because a weapon can kill in 330 milliseconds or whatever I said before doesn't mean it always will, and just because it can achieve these magnificent stats doesn't mean you'll be able to do it when you pick the weapon up. While the 8.35 Marksman has significantly less upward and horizontal recoil and less spread when firing from the hip. The RSC has slightly less spread when aiming down sight, however the value is so small it's not really noticeable. The main difference is that the 8.35 is easier to spam bullets and you'll be accurate even if you click fire as fast as you possibly can, whilst the RSC requires a little more precision. The RSC also has a magazine with 1 extra round, which doesn't sound like a lot, but certainly makes a difference when taking on 2 enemies at once, whilst the higher damage is just amazing. As you can tell from the video clips in the background, the RSC packs a punch, and even if you are the biggest 8.3 fanboy in the world, taking the RSC would not be a bad decision. There aren't many more satisfying feelings than getting 3 kills with 6 rounds. Now the big thing here, and this is what we've been building up to, which is the better gun, the 8.35 or the RSC? Well, I think you'd have to say that the RSC has the edge. It's a weapon that can just do more damage. If you gave it to somebody who had the best aim in the world and they knew the maps back to front and they were playing people who just couldn't compete with them, I think the RSC would yield more kills. That being said, the 8.35 is still a fantastic weapon, and I see some players pulling off fantastic kill streaks with it. Maybe you prefer the scope, because that is another factor that comes into the difference between the two weapons and the time it takes to scope in with the weapons as well. So many different variables. But as I've mentioned, I've gone through the most important ones and I've come out with the RSC being the better of the two. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me. Is there another weapon in the medic class that could take the RSC's crown as the best weapon in class? Or do you not agree at all? Do you think these high risk, high reward weapons aren't really worth the top spot on the podium? Thanks for watching, guys. Remember to leave your comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next video.